What's up, everybody? Welcome to Group Chat Football Live. My name is Danny Enriquez. I am here with the Fink himself, Clay Fink. We're here to break down some of the latest portal acquisitions. Not quite yet, but we're getting there. We're kind of like circling, identifying potential names in the portal, high school recruiting, coaching changes, just rising stars at this point in the football season. That's what we do here on Group Chat Sports. Like to tell you what's happening, maybe a little bit before it happens, just so when portal season comes and we're pumping out videos multiple times a day, you're ready and you know some of the players. And nobody better identifying up and coming players than the man himself, Clay Fink. Clay, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Another solid weekend of football. UK fan. We beat an FCS team. I'll take it. You never know. I mean, Stoops hasn't lost to an FCS team, but you can never rule it out with Kentucky football. Florida State, student at Florida State, so it's always good to see him win. But overall, just a good weekend of football. Don't have to review any negative games or anything, and the fans seem to be in good spirits for the teams I'm most tuned into, and I'm excited to talk about the guys that we have on our list today.
Yeah, Cutter Boley, man, stud. You highlighted him on a show really a few weeks ago, and he's only been on the upswing since. And obviously not the same kind of opponent with what you guys play Western
Tennessee Tech.
Tennessee
They are
Tech.
10-0 in the FCS, though,
There you go.
for
It's
what it's worth.
some highlight reel runs from your man Boley, man. He was balling. So no, excited to watch him as this thing moves along. But first, let's stay in the SEC and talk about somebody that I think might be the most underrated back in the country. He's not an unknown by any means, but we talk about Ahmad Hardy, who in some respects replaced him. We've talked about other backs, Jeremiah Love, of course. I'm not sure anybody means more to their team than this guy right here in Kawan Lacey.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's unfortunate because I really was starting to maybe get behind the agenda of Kawan Lacey. Is this the best running back in the SEC up until this week? And I'm a big Ahmad Hardy guy for Missouri, which is the team that Lacey signed with out of high school, spent his freshman year with last year, didn't really play much. Missouri brings in his replacement. Unfortunately, Kawan Lacey had his best game of the year in the same week that Ahmad Hardy ran for 300 yards for Missouri. So he's probably not the best running back in the SEC, but he's probably second. And I would definitely agree that he's the most underrated back in the country. I mean, just a very shockingly complete back. You look at this guy, it's hard to believe that he's only 5'11". The way he runs, and I'm sure we'll watch some of his high school stuff, but you can just tell he looks almost like a wide receiver who's just like getting some yards after catch, long strides. He was a former track guy, ran a 10.79 and a 10.81, both as a junior in the 100-meter, top 200 recruit, top 15 running back. And he went to Missouri as a freshman. Really didn't see the field a whole lot, just 113 total yards in 6 games. Heads over to Ole Miss, and he has become a force. I mean, probably the engine of that offense, especially with Trinidad Chambliss struggling a little bit down the stretch these past few weeks, but super fun player to watch.
Yeah, and in the red zone, you see the 19 touchdowns. It feels like that's really where he's been devastating. Florida, I mean, you kind of knew when he was getting the ball, it was going to be lights out. Although Florida's defense did fight as strong as they possibly could. Yeah,
Right.
Lacey out of Dallas, he was a rising player. I remember him when he was a senior in high school. He was a guy that, because of the track numbers and some of the highlights, just some of the physical characteristics, his name was generating steam. You have him here as the number 15 running back where it ended. I don't think it started there. I think it was a process with him climbing up the ranks. And then you go to Missouri, which seemed like a great fit for him. Very unusual that he leaves. They pour a lot as replacement, and both guys are elite at the SEC level. It's interesting kind of trade. I'm sure both schools are happy, but Ole Miss big beneficiary. And it's one thing Ole Miss has done, I think, that deserves more credit is, yes, they got the Walter Nolans of the world that everybody was trying to get a Walter Nolan, but their ability to evaluate in the portal. Obviously, Trinidad Chambliss probably top of the list playing D2 ball for Ferris State, but a Kawan Lacey who is not necessarily projected to be what he was Trey Harris was I'm struggling with the corner that plays for the Commanders.
Oh my gosh, what is
Who
this?
was he was not himself the biggest name corner in the portal. Alabama transfer, talented guy, but they ended up bringing him over and allowing
Trey Amos.
Yeah, Amos. So he was someone who developed at Ole Miss. So if they're not doing it in high school recruiting, they're almost doing a little bit of a version of high school recruiting in college, where they are bringing these players in that are unrealized talents and then allowing them to become what you maybe thought they would be out of high school.
Yeah, no, you were talking about, I mean, and I think this is just props to Drink out of Eli Drinkwitz for Missouri. Obviously, the recruiting rankings recognize this, but I assume he had to be in a little bit early on this guy if he was able to land him. Just looking at the offer list that he got throughout his senior season of high school football, just everybody seemed to realize. And he had 1,300 yards on 10 yards a carry as a sophomore, but on the same amount of carries, basically his junior year, only 730 yards. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know if he was hurt. I don't know if that was I don't know how many games he played. But then he comes back his senior year, 1,500 rushing yards, 19 rushing touchdowns, 6.8 yards per carry, 480 receiving yards in his final 2 years in high school. And I think this guy, I hate to say it for a top 200 recruit, but it kind of feels like this guy went under the radar just because he blew up so late.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, the speed is the speed, right? When you're running 10.79, you're over 200 pounds. I think that just on its own is going to get you some helium as a prospect, but he runs kind of different. I mean, you pointed out in some of your pre-show comments that it's almost like a wide receiver, high cut, not necessarily your classic running back, like a Quinshon Judkins, for example, is like your quintessential running back, whereas Lacy, a different animal. Looking at the running back landscape, Jeremiah Love, you obviously expect him to move on to the draft. Ahmad Hardy, he's going to be a name that I think will factor in. Your boy from North Texas, I know you're ready to talk about him wherever every chance he gets. We'll see where Eric Morris goes. I think he's kind of like the key guy in the portal process. Depending if he takes a job, then maybe he can take Hawkins and his quarterback Mestamaker, 2 NFL prospects out of the backfield there with him. But in terms of next year stars, guys that are not draft eligible, guys that I think are going to be faces of college football, Kewan Lacy, he could be right there in the mix when you come back to school after running for 20 plus touchdowns in the SEC.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's hard to believe that the SEC has. I don't know if they're going to have any high-end draft picks at running back this year, but they have an argument, and Jeremiah Love is Jeremiah Love. But put Jeremiah Love aside, they have an argument for the 2 best running backs in America not named Jeremiah Love, and neither of them are draft eligible between Ahmad Hardy and Kewan Lacy. So it can be really awesome. You throw guys like Isaac Brown in that mix, it could be a really fun class again next year. I put this on our notes. I got to mention it. One of my favorite things that I learned about Kewan Lacy while researching him, and this is just such a Lane Kiffin player type of thing to do, is his celebration every time he scores is he's like whipping a belt, BTA. We know what that means. And he signed an NIL deal that benefits the Ole Miss NIL collective a couple of weeks ago with an Ole Miss leather embroidered belt. So I like it. I like the innovation there, getting ahead of the game, getting some NIL deals out of it. But he seems like a character just off the many, many touchdown celebrations we've been able to see. Yeah. You lead the country in touchdowns, you get a lot of chances.
A lot of practice for sure. And he really is. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss has been kind of the story of the Ole Miss season, but I think you could also have success with Austin Simmons in this passing game. Not to downplay what Chambliss has done. Just these are 2 very good quarterbacks in a quarterback-friendly system. I think if you remove Kewan Lacy from this team, it's a whole different team. He's the best back they've had, certainly since Judkins. But they've been making do, I think, aside from Judkins, and Lacy gives him someone that's a true workhorse after Ohio State stole their last workhorse away. So I know, shout out to Kewan Lacy. We'll keep watching his career as he progresses into maybe the best back in the country. It's going to be an interesting race to replace Jeremiah Love. And look, maybe I'm sure Kewan Lacey's not taking any backseat to Love, not as explosive, but certainly somebody who is going to be right in the thick of the playoff race and have a chance to make his name on the college football playoff stage. So moving on here, somebody who doesn't have nearly the national TV coverage of a Kewan Lacey, who we just talked about, but the production has been absolutely unreal, and that is Marcel Williams out of Akron. So this is a guy that I do have some familiarity with going back to his high school days, went to Pompano Beach, Ely, which for those who have followed recruiting for a long time, same school as somebody named Patrick Peterson, the formerly Patrick Johnson, the cornerback for LSU, and then later the Arizona Cardinals. So this school has produced a lot of talent. Signed with Marshall out of high school, played 3 games there, but then against Kent State, man, this guy went absolutely insane. Talk to me about Marcel Williams and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, this is just, I feel like once a week we always have one guy that we've never heard of, or well, you've heard of him, but I've never heard of, and I like to sort the PFF, see who was the top performers, who had the most receiving yards, so-and-so. This is a rivalry game for Toledo. Oof. Hopefully I don't get killed for that.
Oh, yeah.
Akron
in Ohio.
Oh, for Akron versus Kent State, 14 catches, 206 yards, 2 touchdowns, threw for a 2-point conversion on a trick play, and recovered an onside kick. They did lose this game, but man, that's about as complete of a performance as you're going to get. And this is a guy who redshirt freshman, redshirted for Marshall last year, obviously from Florida, always bet on a Florida wide receiver, Florida skill player in general. It's panned out so many times, but I think he's finally hitting his stride, and it's tough to quantify these group of 5 schools in terms of their like cornerback play. And maybe he's gotten, a favorable schedule these past 3 weeks, but he's got 24 catches, 384 yards, and 2 touchdowns over his last 3 games. That's pretty good. And he had only 14 catches for 180 yards and 0 touchdowns in his first 8 games. So this is a guy who seems to be really hitting his stride. Akron's quarterback had a career high in passing yards this week. I saw Ben Finley, I think is his name. So one to watch. I know these guys a lot. There's some guys who are a little hesitant to transfer for a second time, but who knows? I wouldn't rule it out. If I were him, I would probably transfer next year based on if you can keep putting this on tape. This is a high major player for sure.
And you wonder what happened at Marshall. I know they had some coaching turmoil last year, which maybe led to this. They had some pretty good players, actually. A lot of them went down to Southern Miss with their head coach. But yeah, with Marcel Williams, just thinking back to him in high school, 2 things stood out. Good ball in the air receiver, although not a lumbering guy. He actually is pretty quick. He can get open, but he was good with the ball in the air. That's translated. You see that all over his tape with these last couple of games where he's been balling. 14 receptions. You're going to win some contested situations. But he was always a bigger receiver. South Florida, typically you'll have, and when I say bigger, I don't mean tall, I mean physically strong. South Florida, you get a lot of smaller, like 5'9", like, Tutu Atwell types, if you remember him, guys of that nature. Antonio Brown, of course. Guys are just smaller, quicker guys. That's what you're basically getting on average down here. Now, of course, you get the Jeremiah Smiths occasionally, which are freaks of nature and end up going as high as you want in the draft. But Marcel Williams was somebody that at high school level, he was like 180 pounds, like legit. He was a strong guy at that level. And now he's up into the 200 range. Again, not a huge receiver height-wise, but somebody who can win contested catches, who can get open, who can beat press, who's just physically strong. And you mentioned the portal. I mean, South Florida guys tend to be pretty mobile. I don't want to stereotype, but that's something you see. It starts in Pop Warner, kids going from park to park, then they go from high school to high school. We have open transfer high schools down here in Florida. So a lot of these kids went to multiple high schools, and then they go to college, and trend continues already from Marshall to Akron. Turned out to be a good move. Yeah, I could definitely see this guy being a hot commodity in the portal. I think of Pitt. Pitt's a school that they've really rated Western Carolina, which is a G5 school. Yeah. That's where they got Raphael Williams, who's one of their top receivers. Desmond Reed, of course, their star do-it-all player. They also got Katarius Hicks, who's a South Florida guy from Louisville. So they like to get these South Florida guys there in Pitt. And I think that'd be a fit if they continue doing what they like to do. I'm not trying to take him off Akron. I'm just thinking of teams that tend to hunt in this market. But I'd be surprised if this guy did not go for a high major promotion with the way he's playing in the MAC.
Yeah, it's just as you said, it sucks that we're giving the spotlight to these kids who are playing for teams like Akron, and we're finishing up the segment by saying like, yeah, here are some teams, that maybe we can watch for him when he probably enters the portal, but ultimately not all of these guys are going to be professional football players. And get your bag, man. If Pitt wants to pay up, I don't know if Akron can match that, and it sucks, but it's the reality of this landscape right now in college football, and it's tough to keep those guys around. He looks like a complete receiver, in my opinion. I think I don't know if there's really like a skill that particularly stands out. Maybe just like the play strength at the catch point, just kind of like you pointed out. I think he plays pretty strong at the catch point, but he's just well-rounded, and every team would like that.
Where do you see him playing? More of a slot? Do you see him on the outside with his size? How do you see him fitting in?
Yeah, so I put down that he's played 83% of his career snaps out wide, and I actually thought that was notable because then when I saw that, I was like, okay, like let me go watch this guy really, let me watch a full game of him. So I watched this week's game, and yeah, like I don't really care. He could be 5'11", he could be really 5'10", but if you played with the play strength that he plays with, and he's a redshirt freshman, like he can add a lot more weight while he's still in college. Like, what's stopping him from being like 5'10", 215? Because this is a guy, like, he seems to carry the weight very well, and he plays strong. I think this is an outside receiver, and he would be one of the shorter outside receivers in the NFL if, that's the role that he eventually got, assuming he does end up going pro. But he doesn't play like a 5'11", 200 pounder, like he's so much stronger than that, I think, on the field.
We got breaking news, Fink. You ready for this?
I just got a buzz on my Apple Watch, so I haven't looked.
Here you go. I'll tell you what the buzz is. And I think if you're an ACC football fan, which we both are, pretty significant news. Significant news to your Florida State Seminoles.
This is James Franklin.
James Franklin has agreed to become the next head coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies, who Miami plays this weekend. 128 wins over 15 seasons as head coach at Vanderbilt and Penn State, led Penn State to the college football playoffs, semifinals last year. I think this is beyond a home run for Virginia Tech. Obviously, I spent a lot of time. I grew up in South Florida, but I spent a lot of time in Baltimore, in Washington, D.C., right? So I was able to see what the fan base is like out there and kind of the makeup of it as a college football community. And they are very much either Virginia Tech fans or Penn State fans. There's a lot of overlap. You get some Maryland fans in there as well, but the overlap between Penn State and Virginia Tech and the recruiting basis is huge. I think James Franklin is, to me, one of the absolute, like, legit top 5 coaches in college football. I know it's a hot take, but when you look at the wins, when you look at what he did at Vanderbilt, 9 wins at Vanderbilt twice, and then doing what he did at Penn State, the amount of professionals, and I'm talking about 7th-round picks, first, second-round picks that he's put out, the freaks of nature that he's found that were not 5-star players or maybe low 4-star, high 3-star players that turned into first-round picks. Outstanding. So to me, this is a home run for Virginia Tech. Tough break for Florida State. You heard that Florida State wanted James Franklin, or at least that was the rumor, and he was looking at them. They beat Virginia Tech. I don't know if that has anything to do with it with keeping Norvell, but it was, a lot of people thought it was the Franklin Bowl, and the loser really won or the winner really lost. I see you reacting with a lot of negativity as a Florida State fan. So tell me, it seems like you felt like we might have lost the Franklin Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did. I mean, man, this is when I look at, my realistic FSU hot board. We're not throwing Lane Kiffin on there. Lane Kiffin's not coming to FSU. Nick Saban, whatever. I think it's James Franklin tier 1, and then honestly, there's not a tier 1.5. Might not be a tier 2. Like, I think there is a gap, in my opinion, for what FSU needs. And I say this as if he's still on the open market, because clearly he's not, because clearly FSU dropped the ball on this one. Thankfully, they got to 5-5 by beating Virginia Tech. Surely this won't be a game they regret in the future. But oh my gosh, you need stability in this program. And what does he bring? Stability. Does he bring a national championship upside? Maybe in the ACC, but probably not, just based on what he's shown throughout his career. But maybe in the ACC, he certainly brings college football playoff appearance upside. What will he do at that point? But ultimately, what is the floor with Franklin? 8-4, or and then go to a bowl game? Like, he's not. I just do not think that a guy who has this much experience compared to a guy at this level, compared to a guy like Norvell, I don't know how he even went 2-10, but like, he's not going to go 2-10. Obviously, the floor for a Franklin would be worlds higher than Norvell. So yeah, that's embarrassing. I think, to be honest, I think that's an indictment on the athletic director. I know I came on here the morning that they put out the statement, the day after, or the Monday after the Stanford game, and it was like 20 minutes after. And I said that I think the athletic director fired himself in that moment by putting out that statement. I think this is the nail in the coffin. I think I probably said that at the time, but this is truly the nail in the coffin, because if he's fired right now, how many different national college football reporters have put out that James Franklin was waiting for FSU to open up? It seems like that was true from my understanding. And Virginia Tech kind of told him, like, hey, man, this is your last weekend. We're not going to wait it out any longer. And ultimately, yeah, if FSU lost on Saturday, they probably fire Norvell, because they probably recognize the situation. And I would hope they recognize that James Franklin is who they need to hire. But, oh my gosh, so unserious.
Fink is going through it. So here, let's before I get more of the Virginia Tech perspective, I want to stick on FSU, because these were tied together. I see your reaction. I see the feeling. So where does FSU go now with Franklin off the board?
I think the first call needs to be Sumrall, but I would be stunned if Sumrall. I mean, he's not too far off of all the Saban and Jimbo and guys in that category. See, that's what sucks, is like, we get into the kind of, I don't want to say gimmicky, but I kind of throw Nick Saban, Jimbo, Ed O, Dion. Dion's a current coach, but like, Dion obviously is not having the season we hope this year, and honestly doesn't look like a guy that I would want to hire. So, and he's a former player, so that's kind of a gimmicky. But we get past this, like, who else is realistic? Like, Drinkwitz isn't probably gonna. I don't think Drinkwitz would come here. I don't know why he would. Right? Missouri's probably a better job than FSU, just from what he's turned it into, at least.
Yeah, you think Penn State, if he were to move along. Yeah. Now look, Florida State's won 3 championships since Penn State won their last one. So I don't look at those as programs that aren't equivalent, but it just feels like Drinkwitz is not. He didn't feel like a Florida State to me. I think that'd be a great hire. What about Golesh from USF?
I'm not a huge Golesh guy, but honestly, if they fire Norvell, really, I think that might honestly be a mistake if it comes to that point where I thought it was so ridiculous after the Stanford game when I was hearing some FSU media members saying, like, look, man, I know it sucks to hear, but like, it might be wise to wait a year. This is a terrible coaching cycle for FSU. You're typically going to be a top 2 job on the market in any given coaching cycle. You might not even, you're probably number 5 this year, 4 or 5. You were Auburn. And then if Ole Miss opens up, there's so many coaching jobs on the market, and you have to pay the money. You can decrease the buyout by another year next year. And I thought that was so silly at first, but now we have James Franklin going to Virginia Tech. Who are these better schools going to get? One's Penn State, because they've already fired their coaches. They're a step ahead of FSU. They're actually in probably negotiations with these coaches. Obviously, I mean, Virginia Tech is. They're talking to Franklin midseason. So, what are you going to do if you fire Norvell after the season? Because honestly, I don't have faith in this administration to fire him midseason. And what are you going to do? Like, are you just going to get the scraps left over from all those other schools? I just think they handled this so poorly, and it could be very, very devastating long term for this program.
Yeah, it's look, I'm a Miami fan, so putting the Miami fan hat on, I was petrified of James Franklin going to Florida State. Again, I am a James Franklin fan, have been the longest time. I think he's the man. Now, to your point, timing-wise, Florida State does have the number 14 class in the country committed. Guys like Chauncey Kennan from Booker, some talented players. I know you've lost a few guys as well, but you do have a few guys that can play. So maybe the thought is you had, a couple true freshmen that you feel very good about at FSU between Chroma, obviously the Desir twins, then Danzy, who's a redshirt freshman. He's a young player as well, right? Is Danzy a redshirt freshman or a true freshman?
Redshirt.
So you have young players that have played maybe another year of youth movement, so to speak, for Norvell, and see if those guys develop. And if they do, the next coach maybe has a better roster to take over with another year of seeing how it goes. Like I said, the buyout's lower. You get to a better coaching market without a flood of competition. I know Canes Cats mentioned Mark Stoops, who you have deep knowledge of. I mean, do you see that being a fit, knowing both programs pretty well?
For FSU, like,
or for anybody, coach? Do you see that working?
No, I mean, like, just like knowing, I grew up like not 3 houses, but like in the same neighborhood as Stoops. Like, we're close to their family. Like,
must be nice.
Not well. You get farther back in the neighborhood, it gets a whole lot nicer. I'll tell you what. Like, it's definitely a discrepancy from the entrance to the exit of the neighborhood. But no, I went to school with his kids, and Stoops, just from every time we've seen him, he's gotten more and more checked out. And you see that in like the press conferences. You see that in everything. And I just kind of get the vibe that he's the longest tenured head coach in the SEC right now. Now that Saban's gone, I think he's waited probably like 8 years now at this point. Basically, ever since that 2018 team with Josh Hines Allen and Benny Snell, he's been begging Iowa to open up. He really wants Iowa to open up. That's his alma mater. That's, I think, where he wants to end his career, but they have the longest tenured coach in the country. So it hasn't happened. And ultimately, I kind of just think, like, I certainly don't think he would step down to like DC or a position coach or anything. I really don't think that if he and Kentucky parted ways, he would coach unless it was Iowa. That's kind of my feeling with it. Just, I think he wants to maybe, try and revive his image on his way out at UK. And
you got a great quarterback.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So I've kind of grown on the idea of Stoops returning next year just because it's so unbelievably horrible financially. Like, you have to pay $38 million within 30 days to fire him. So it's a little different, but I don't know. If I'm basically any other team, I probably wouldn't be super intrigued by Stoops as a head coach or any position, anything.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you're paying these guys and you're saving money that you would, let's say you fire Stoops for Kentucky, you fire a Norvell if you're FSU, you're eating buyout money. maybe it makes sense again, given the market that what we just saw here, the competition. Why don't you spend on the roster as far as getting this recruiting class in the portal? Give it one last go. Make sure your young guys are playing, right? You don't want those guys sitting on the bench so they transfer for the next coach.
Yeah.
And then either it works or the next coach has some young guys. Again, Kentucky's got Cutter Boley, so you can recruit into the portal there and probably get a better. I mean, Kentucky's not been bad in the portal, I don't think, but you end up being a net loser this year, I think, because you didn't have a quarterback.
100%.
Right? You
Yeah.
Receivers that you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was fine to part ways with Barryon Brown, but I would certainly love to see the Cutter Boley to Dane Key connection this year. Neither of them have been having strong seasons for Nebraska and LSU. So just throwing that out there. But UK does have a couple of good weapons at receiver and tight end. But they, much like FSU, will have to replace all 5 starting offensive linemen next year. And unlike FSU, they actually have the pitch of, hey, do you want to come block for this redshirt sophomore who really finished off last year hot and is a guy that we think we can build around and might potentially extend this head coach's tenure here for a couple of years? And that's a better pitch, I think, than FSU saying, hey, like, we're going to either we're going to have Sperry, or we're going to bring in a portal quarterback, or we're going to have Tommy, who honestly probably isn't super fun to block for. You gotta extend the plays. You gotta block for like 5 seconds on a lot of plays because he's running around in the backfield. So yeah, it's a good pitch. I think they'll, you have Cutter Boley at quarterback. If you can bring him back, that's going to be a big deal for Stoops, to be honest. I think that should be his number one selling point to the administration. But ultimately, I don't know what FSU does from this point. I've fully dismissed the Stoops FSU. I get a healthy amount of fans in my comment section suggesting Stoops to FSU, but I'm good.
I'll say this. Now, it was funny. We're talking about Kentucky. We're talking FSU. Now, bring it all the way back. It shows you how connected, first of all these things are, these coaching searches. But bringing it back to Virginia Tech, I'm going to make a wild prediction. I could be dead wrong, but I truly believe this. I think in 3 years, Virginia Tech will be better than Penn State, if not earlier. And the reason I believe that is because you look at that graphic that came up about some of these schools that have lost their coaches midstream, whether it was Florida, LSU, Penn State. Which school had the most decommitments? By far, exponentially, it was Penn State, because that's how integral Franklin is to the recruiting part. He's also, in my view, an elite evaluator. Again, I'll use the NFL draft as the evidence of that, and I'll use the fact that they weren't always getting top 5 classes at Penn State. In fact, they rarely did. He got good recruits, but it was the evaluation that set him apart. Getting the Abdul Carter was like, a low 4, and he ends up being this. Yeah. So that's kind of what they did. I'll give you an example and a player of the kind of guy that I think goes to Virginia Tech and becomes a star. Tyler Warren is not from Pennsylvania.
Tyler Warren he's from Virginia. He was a 3-star.
He was a 3-star quarterback basketball player. I mean, like all these guys that we always talk about on the show, because the same things repeat with these players. Multi-sport, multi-position, underrated traits guy, had a verified 4.7. We know the story of Tyler Warren.
Olu Fashanu was barely a 4-star out of Washington, D.C. So Joey Porter Jr., very low 4-star. Brenton Strange, low 4-star. So it's not even just the recruiting at a place where you're not in Florida. You don't have like the hotbed of skill position guys and, some of the better athletes, but it's these low 4-star guys, and he's just churning out first-round picks with them.
And Tyler Warren was a 3-star, high 3-star.
Yeah, right.
And he's from Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is east of Blacksburg. So this area is hot. Another one to watch here. If I'm James Franklin, who I hope gets fired. I mean, they might have a relationship. I don't know if there's I don't mean it like that, but in terms of from a pure cutthroat football perspective, I know he just got the vote of confidence, but maybe that's a short-lived vote of confidence. I mean, Mike Loxley, because Mike Loxley has been able at right there near DC in Chevy Chase for Maryland. He's acquired an elite quarterback, elite quarterback talent, a young guy, a freshman that would go anywhere in the country and be a hot commodity, right? Obviously, he's got a long way to go in terms of college football. one of the best, which you highlighted on an earlier show of group chat, one of the best pair of edge rushers, young edge rushers in the country. You got Zion Ely committed. These are all local guys to Maryland, but Maryland, Virginia Tech, I mean, I've made that drive from DC to Blacksburg. It's not very far. So if Franklin can maybe squeeze out Maryland from that area, to kind of undo what Loxley's done, and Loxley's on the hot seat, so he's holding on for dear life. Take that area back, cut into some of the areas that he went to with Penn State. Canescat mentioned Theo Johnson's from Canada catching touchdowns for the Giants right now. So, I mean, you can go there too and get some of those type of guys. I could see this program being extremely talent rich, and Penn State, yes, Joe Paterno, you go back to all those old teams, that's fine. Penn State was not exactly a world beater for a long, long time. Virginia Tech, in fact, was a better program than Penn State for big stretches of the early 2000s, really beyond that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's not unheard of. I think Franklin kind of tilted those expectations himself and was the victim of it ultimately. But I could see, we'll see who Penn State hires. I would go probably like a Matt Campbell if I was them personally. But Drinkwitz would be a heck of a hire as well. Another great evaluator, a guy who built a great program with NFL players all over the place. But depending who they hire, I could see Virginia Tech elevating. So shout out to them for doing what they need to do, and my condolences to the FSU fans who probably were already kind of scanning the draft history of Penn State and thinking it'd be some of their guys in the future. So,
yeah, I just closed that tab. So,
yeah, let's get a new one open for you. Totally different story, but while we're talking about really good evaluations of tight ends, about Brody Foley from Tulsa. You brought this name to me. I'd never heard of Brody Foley. I probably should have. Pretty big recruit out of Cincinnati. He was one of the highest rated recruits in the history of Indiana. He was like a 4-star player. 247 really had it on this one. They had him rated really higher than the composite. I think composite's 3-star, 4-star, and 247. He was originally a running back and linebacker before a growth spurt. Played 3-year special teams of Indiana, not a lot of offense, and then this year has completely blown up and looks like at 6'6", 260 redshirt junior, potential NFL player.
Yeah, I mean, 34 catches, top 15 mark among tight ends in the FBS, 509 receiving yards, fourth most amongst tight ends in the FBS, 7 receiving touchdowns, leads all tight ends, and he also has 2 rushing touchdowns on just 4 carries. So this guy's kind of been the whole offense for Tulsa is what I'm getting at here. And I don't know how else to put it other than he's like a yak monster. Some of the play designs they run for him, like they'll have him come behind the line and just toss it up to him right behind the line of scrimmage, let him run with the ball. He's going to cut, make a man miss. He's going to stiff arm a guy, make a man miss. It doesn't really matter how it's going to happen, but he's going to break at least 1 tackle every time. And he's like their primary screen, gadget play guy at 6'6", 260 pounds. So that's why, like, he was such a highly rated recruit, and you kind of see that pop up, and it never really worked out. Worked out at Indiana. He played under Kurt last year. Obviously, this is his first year at Tulsa. But he's got another year. He's been one of the most productive tight ends in the country, and maybe he stays at Tulsa and has just a monster year next year, or maybe he goes somewhere else, and this could be another one of those, Tanner Colziol, Terrence Carter, group of 5 tight ends who had put up a lot of numbers last year, and then enters the portal and goes to a Power 5 team or Power 4 team and puts up numbers once again.
Yeah, there's a connection between, I guess, the tight end coach of Indiana and Trey Lamb, the head coach of Tulsa. Just hearing Trey Lamb talk about it in one of these pressers, he said that Cignetti wanted more receivers on the field, so he kind of de-emphasized the tight end, and that allowed Foley to enter the portal. And then the tight end coach for Indiana was friends with Trey Lamb and said, hey, you want to get this guy. This guy's a really good player, and I think he's got more to do if you feed him the ball. I'm curious to see where this guy goes. He does have another year of eligibility. I think he would, just watching his highlights and watching what he's been doing lately. He would have a lot of love in the portal. You said the yak, the fact they throw him all those shuttles, formerly a running back, so you could see that when he's doing all those things. I always think when it comes to running back, I know this name is not a popular name because of off the field stuff, but anytime a tight end's playing running back, I think of like an Aaron Hernandez. They used to throw in those shuttles all the time. That was one of his kind of strengths, was just a lateral quickness. Lateral quickness in a tight end is so big because it's big at every position, but really a tight end, you got to get open fast. So I think those guys that are laterally quick that you see have that run after catch, not only do they get those short passes and do something with them, which is a big part of the tight end's job, but they can get open faster because their short area is pretty high level. So I think that was a interesting part of this guy's profile. Will he go pro? I don't know how deep the tight end class is this year. Last year's was ridiculous. So we'll see if this year is equally strong at tight end, just playing it through. I mean, you have Sadiq at Oregon, Kyle Stowers. I'm thinking about my Marlins. Eli Stowers at Vanderbilt, who we highlighted last week. Who else is looking strong at tight end as a potential prospect? It seems like a thinner year compared to last year. We had Warren, Arroyo, Loveland, Mason Taylor, Ferguson, a lot of high level guys. So maybe he tested in the pros, or comes back to Tulsa, or pulls Will Held. I'm sorry, trying to blank on the name. The tight end for Ohio State.
Yeah. Oh, I forget his name.
Yeah. So the Purdue tight end transferred to Ohio State, and I know he got paid a pretty penny. Max Clare.
Yeah.
Will Halt was the Purdue defensive end that went to
defensive end. Yeah.
Max Clare, who transferred Purdue to Ohio State, made a pretty penny. Obviously, he's on a pretty good team. So I don't know if it's helped his stock or hurt his stock particularly, but I know it helped his pocketbook quite a bit to make that move. 295 yards for Clare on the year, so he's doing fine at Ohio State. But I think maybe that's in the cards for our friend here, Brody Foley. But definitely someone to keep an eye on when you have that kind of size and that ability to roll with the ball in your hands.
Yeah. It won't load. I was trying to pull up the consensus tight end rankings right now, but in a class where, you have Sadiq and you have Clare and you have these guys who are kind of putting up good numbers in the receiving game, they're all undersized. And then you have a 6'6", 260-pounder. Here we go. Okay. Kenyon Sadiq, number one, is 6'3", 255. Justin Jolie is up there, 6'3", 250.
Yeah, which I'm not sure Jolie, who I like, is that much different physically than Foley. As far as
I agree. Michael Trigg, 6'3", 250. Terrence Carter, 6'2", 245. A lot of these weights are probably
these are tweeners we're getting to.
A little inflated, I think. Stowers, 6'3", 240 for Vandy. Royer. So really, I mean, he would be one of the bigger tight ends in this class. And I guess I don't know. I haven't really looked at like what next year's class could look like, but ultimately, do you want to mess? If I'm him, I'm probably entering the portal and trying to get a bag from one of these schools. You never know how the production at the group of 5 level is going to translate to NFL stuff. So get a bag while you're in college. I think this is probably a guy we'll be talking about in December or January.
And if you're trying to look at, tight end trends, right? How we get tight ends in the portal. Clare is an easy one. That guy was the top tight end. He was already a good player in the Big Ten. But you look at Stowers and you look at Foley, they were big recruits. They just didn't have the opportunity to kind of do what they do. They played multiple positions. So you get a guy who enters the portal as a big recruit, doesn't work at their first stop. In the case of Stowers, who was Texas A&M, Foley, Indiana. And then you say, okay, can we harness some of that athletic ability in a bigger role, build more around them? They'll get more manufactured touches because we're Tulsa. We got to get the ball to our best athletes. We can't just have them get lost in the wash at a big program like Indiana or Texas A&M. And then the player develops. So maybe if you're looking for a tight end in the portal, you look at some of these highly rated washout guys and say, man, this guy's got a lot of ability. He can move. He's got size. Didn't get the ball. It's hard to get tight ends the ball if they're not like a featured guy like a Tyler Warren. So, hey, let's see what happens when we feature him. So just food for thought as we move forward here on Group Chat Sports. Speaking of transfers, this is a name that I honestly not realized just how good he was playing. He was someone that was very much on the radar last year because of how big of a recruit he was, and that's going to be Lance Hurd out of Tennessee. Just a big physical tackle. We talked about this draft and how it's not quite as good as maybe some people hoped it would be. When you talk about, let me just make this bigger. Give me 1 second. There we go. Maybe the class is not what people hoped it would be, a tight end running back. I'd put tackle in that same category as like, this is not a great tackle class. I mean, you really let's say Francis Mauigoa plays guard. There's really not a lot of great tackles that you get excited about. Then you watch this guy's film, extremely physical. Yeah, the technique's very raw, somewhat of a waist bender. He hits it's not like he latches on and just drives guys. He likes to pop guys, former defensive lineman. You could see he's raw, but he's a 2-year starter now at this point at left tackle for Tennessee. Lost 25 pounds, healthier. You wrote this here in the rundown. His grade jumped 26 points from 44.9 to 70.9. You can see it on film. Again, the weight loss, I think, helped. And the fact that this is a former defensive lineman who's learning more about offensive line. So how do you see Lance Heard, and where do you think his what do you think his future holds?
Yeah, I ultimately, I think it would be in a traditional class. I think it would be smart for him to return next year, just get another year under his belt, get a little bit more refined in his technique, because he does have those NFL tools. According to 247 out of high school, he has over a 7-foot wingspan and over 36-inch arms. Those would both be like 95th percentile marks among the NFL level. But I mean, in this class, like, I think he has the athletic tools probably to stick at tackle, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's kind of a Francis. I think Francis Mauigoa is probably getting mocked more frequently to guard right now than tackle, it feels like. And I don't disagree with that, but that's a guy who I would let fail at tackle for sure, just because he has so many of the tools that you want at tackle, and tackle is so valuable. I feel the same way about Lance Heard. I think you just have to let him fail at tackle before you were to kick him inside, especially with this phenomenal like arm length and wingspan, just traits that you would hope for your left tackle to have. And I think the pass protection advancement this year has just been really, really encouraging. He's just been so much more refined with his hands. Last year he was a hugger, to be honest. Like he just hug guys, take them for a ride. I feel like he got away with a shocking amount of penalties last year. I watched like 3 games of him, and I think he had 3 penalties in those games, and I thought it could have been like 8. But that's kind of mostly gotten removed from his game this year. He's really refined his hands, taken that next step, and I think he's on the right trajectory. And I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know if it's the financially advisable move for him to return to school, but I would love to see sophomore David Sanders on the right side, who I posted a short about, and senior Lance Heard on the left side, 2 5-stars at the bookends at tackle for Tennessee next year. That'd be so cool. And I think that would help a lot, probably a lot, if they have to recruit a new quarterback in the portal. So,
and they have some young talent at quarterback too. Obviously, some young talent coming in, and some guys. I like McIntyre's ability. I think he's an interesting guy. So they got a good thing going on offense in Tennessee, and obviously that's been a consistently good offense. I mean, it is what it is. Probably their low point was with the very expensive, very publicized Nico, and I think it's heading nowhere but up, because when you have your trenches on point, your tackles on point, especially with Sanders there for the long term, you're in pretty good shape. But yeah, I was shocked when I really broke down this tackle class, and I haven't broken it down like in depth, but I know you're a big draft guy. Like, let's put Mauigoa at guard. Who are the best tackles in this class? I mean, Caden Proctor is as inconsistent as it gets. Yeah. I get the physical traits. I get it. But you can't tell me if Caden Proctor you feel good about putting that card in as a top 10 pick at tackle.
I think Caden Proctor is a guard at the next level personally. Spencer Fano, I love the Utah tackles, but I kind of think he's an interior offensive lineman as well. He's playing at 295 this year, and he looks like a tight end. He has short arms, and he's skinny as all get out. Like you just don't see offensive tackles at the NFL level built like him. Caleb Lomu is my number 1 offensive lineman, but like I think he's probably going to return to school, is what I've heard. He's still young. He's a redshirt sophomore this year. Blake Miller, honestly, if that all happens how I expect, Proctor, Fano, Maui Noah all kick inside. Shout out to James Foster on Twitter because I was very anti Blake Miller last year. This summer, I thought he was just way too weak, and he's been playing phenomenal this year. I didn't realize until saw a couple of tweets about it, but Blake Miller for Clemson might be the bright spot. And honestly, outside of him, I don't know if there's another like legitimate tackle body type in this class outside of like Lance Hurd, So yeah, I don't know. His agent's gonna have a tough decision to make. That's all I know.
Yeah, Blake Miller's going to be an interesting one, just because, I don't know what he looks like when he's facing big guys every single snap, like in the Senior Bowl or something like that. I mean, this has not been an offensive line factory at Clemson under Dabo. Jordan McFadden, John Simpson, I guess, two guys to start, but I can't think of one tackle that starts in the NFL or plays in the NFL from Clemson. So that would be different. Doesn't mean the side of the helmet dictates everything, but just, that'd be a jump. And it's amazing. You're talking about Blake Miller as maybe the top tackle in the draft. If things play out a certain way, I mean, like, is that really a first round type of tackle? And if it is, what the hell's happening at Clemson? You got a first round tackle, you got a first round DN, you got a first round defensive tackle, you got a first round corner, you got a quarterback that everybody knows since high school. It's interesting, but look, kind of bringing it all back home to Lance Hurd. He's got to look at that, and that might affect his decision. But then also he might just say, look, I'm not ready. And if I go there and bust and I'm getting beat in pass protection and my hands are all over the place and I don't have my pad level where it needs to be and I'm spending too much, maybe doesn't serve him to go there and bust, even though it's a bad tackle class. He's better off being drafted in a good tackle class, and who knows what next year holds, but getting drafted in another tackle class and coming in more ready. So interesting decision for him, I think.
No, definitely. I mean, we'll see what he does. I really have no idea what the better move would be. I wonder, Tennessee's probably going to have to either up their money for one of those young quarterbacks next year or pay up for a transfer portal guy. I don't know if they're going to want to pay a ton for Lance Hurd, and I guarantee he could get a lot of money on the open market if he comes back and enters the portal. But he could also get a lot of money if he goes pro. So that's going to be one to monitor. But if he comes back and enters the portal, would it shock you if he's like ranked as the number one tackle in the portal?
Oh, no, at all. But I wouldn't. I mean, I'd stay right at Tennessee. They'll pay him right there.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and I think with him and Sanders, I could see that being sold, and that would help Tennessee a lot. That offense will keep on rolling. I think it's definitely worth Tennessee's while to make him that offer. I think he'll definitely be a highly compensated player if he ends up staying. So finally, we'll finish up on the defensive side of the ball with a really, really impressive guy, and that is Tay Johnson out of Notre Dame. We saw him against Pitt, man. He was hard to miss very quickly, taking picks to the house, knocking guys back, flying all over the place. Multi-sport guy. It was interesting when Miami played Notre Dame the first game of the year and spent the whole year kind of breaking down the depth chart, and you hear about Stroman from Virginia Tech being that safety that's going to solidify this position. Ultimately, Johnson, his first name is actually Bronte Tay Johnson. He got his opportunity after the season started, did not look back, tackling at an extremely high level, super athlete. Maybe the tackling and the physicality was a question coming out just because he was a multi-sport guy. He didn't see it, but I think that question has been answered. This is a very, very impressive athlete and player for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, just name search him on Twitter. You'll see the Notre Dame media has been gushing about this guy really all season, but especially after this week. And you see some of the numbers he put up, just a really complete game that he had this week. And obviously a difference-making play on that pick six for Notre Dame to score 2 touchdowns within the span of like 15 seconds off the clock, offensively and defensively. And it just feels like this is another one of those Notre Dame safeties, those big physical Notre Dame safeties who are athletes. What was the tall 6'5" safety they got last year out of like Wake Forest, or wherever Wake Forest, or somewhere in North Carolina. You know who I'm talking about?
This is a high school kid they brought in.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was him, and I'll have to look.
Well,
But
like obviously they got they got Kyle Hamilton a few years
Kyle
ago.
Hamilton, but they got a
They got,
player.
I could say this past year, they got Joey O'Brien, who's 6'3", 185 pounds from Pennsylvania. A lot of people thought he'd go to Penn State. The guy I saw in person at Battle. Actually, it was at Overtime Elite, OT7 Elite, which is a 7-on-7 tournament. They had Joey O'Brien, who's another tall, super athletic 5-star safety. So they're getting guys. Did you find it?
Jaden Blair.
There you go. So
Jaden
yeah,
Blair, but
they
love
got
the
Dallas
size
Holden
at
too from
safety.
Florida as another tall, rangy defensive back. They've really loaded up the youth. We know Leonard Moore. He's obviously one of the young stars of college football, but man, their youth in general. This guy, 2024 player, so redshirt freshman out of Fort Wayne. Doesn't stop, man. They're doing some good work out there in South Bend when it comes to evaluating.
Yeah, it feels like every Notre Dame safety has to be like 6'2", or they're just like ignoring you. Jaden Blair's 6'5", but this is a guy like 4-star, top 200 recruit in 2024 from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I feel like we're every week at least talking about one guy who's just like the pinnacle of being a or just like a versatile athlete, whether it's playing both ways in football or playing multiple sports. This is a guy who played or started all 4 years at wide receiver and safety for his high school, recorded 139 catches, 2,286 yards, and 41 touchdowns at receiver across his 4 years. He also started 3 years up before his senior year at point guard for the basketball team, 19 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 1 block. And then he also ran track. He ran an 11.400 meter, 22 foot 2 inch long jump, and he was a part of one of the 8 fastest 4x1 relays in Indiana State history. So like this is like as good as it gets in terms of a multi-sport athlete out of high school. And he redshirted last year for Notre Dame. As you said, he took over early in the year in that starting spot at safety. And I like that you pointed this out because, there were some questions about him as a tackler, as a recruit. He really didn't have a lot of opportunities to make difficult or outstanding tackles in high school. Well, now he has a 91.0 tackling grade, which is top 5 among over 5,000 defensive players in the FBS this year. He's missed just 3.8% of his tackles. So I think he's answered that very clearly, answered that question. 4 picks, pick 6, 3 pass breakups. He's a freak, man. He's what it looks like, and Notre Dame probably got him another one at safety, it feels like.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to a play he made against Hassan Longstreet. I know there's a Twitter thread about it as well. I remember seeing it when it happened, which is USC brought in Longstreet to run, which I'm not sure he's that type of runner. He's probably more of just a quarterback that can run a little bit that's a passer. But anyways, they brought him in for like a wildcat deal, and he was going to the sideline, and this dude came out of nowhere and just closed distance in 2 seconds and stopped it for minimal gain. So you can see the straight line speed. Makes sense that he's a sprinter. You see the change of direction, the size, and the coaching, man. These guys coach him up like nobody else. Stroman was a solid player for Virginia Tech, but he wasn't like Delane, where it was like a spectacular guy. I think he was much more of a workman-like player. So you add a guy like this, and now you have basically an entire secondary of NFL day 1, day 2 type talents, and that's why Notre Dame's one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you pointed that out because that was one of the first posts I saw whenever I looked up his name on Twitter, just the Hassan Longstreet. He tracks him, I think, from the opposite hash. He rolls out to the side. He's on like the 4-yard line, and all of a sudden, Tay Johnson's just right there immediately. I think he gives up like 1 yard, but he's got good coverage instincts. He seems to be physical against the run. This seems like a complete safety. I don't know if he's like a guy who would declare after his 3rd year in college, after redshirting last year. If I'm him, I'm spending as long as possible in that Notre Dame safety factory, because the way they've been churning them out these past few years with Kyle Hamilton, Xavier Watts. So I'd stick around as long as possible, soak up everything I can.
Randy Ellison asks, is there a day y'all try to go live? We're trying to work on a schedule right now. I mean, this was a good timely one because the James Franklin news broke, but yeah, we'll let you know, man. Our schedules, we got to get this thing more as a more regular basis now with the Fink. We're gonna do this on a regular basis, especially leading up to portal, because the portal is like there are like so much stuff happening every single day that you need to just kind of stay on it, keep on track so you know what's happening in the world of college football. But again, appreciate everybody joining us. We're gonna like and subscribe to Group Chat Sports. Check out, we'll have all these as individual videos. We'll be doing shorts on there. Of course, we'll be going live and giving you the latest. So it's only going to get more intense as we get the coaching search, portal search. It's going to be hard to keep track of all these guys. Right now, we're in kind of the catch a rising star category of the schedule, but eventually it's going to be about portal, about coaching changes and everything else. So again, like and subscribe to the show. Fink, appreciate you, man. Good luck. My condolences on James Franklin.
We'll see.
All right, guys. See you later. Like and subscribe.